I would like to call the school board meeting for January 8th, 2019 for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Please call the roll.
Mr. Barron.
Here.
Ms. Langford. Here. Ms. Ellsbernd.
Here.
Ms. Delagardelle Shelley.
Here.
Ms. Caldwell Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here. Our first order of business is the appointment and swearing in of our newest director. In November 2018, Natasha Newcomb submitted her resignation, becoming effective on December 31st, 2018. The board started a search process to fill the vacancy for Director District 3. Applications were received from 5 qualified candidates who were then interviewed at a public meeting on Monday, December 17th, 2018. The board held a special meeting directly following the interviews to choose a candidate to fill the District 3 vacancy. Dwana Bradley was selected. So now I will call Dwana up here so that I may administer the oath of office, after which she will officially take her seat to participate in the remainder of the meeting.
Get out of the side of the camera.
We'll have to talk really loud. Hold up your right hand. Okay. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the office of Director in the Des Moines Independent Community School District as now or hereafter required by law?
I do.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
And now that Dwana is seated, I will ask Sharon to again take the roll.
Mr. Barron.
Here.
Ms. Bradley. Here. Ms. Langford.
Here.
Ms. Ellsbernd.
Here.
Ms. Delagardelle Shelley.
Here.
Ms. Caldwell Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here. All right. Moving forward with the business of the night, the next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. And before I ask for a motion, are there any special requests?
Madam Chair, I'd like to request that we pull item number D3, calendar FY20, from the consent agenda and move it to the other discussion items.
Okay. Any others? Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda amended with moving item D3 from consent to other?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have a series of meeting minutes, and we're taking them one by one so that board members can abstain when appropriate according to their attendance at the meeting. The first set of minutes is for December 11th, 2018. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for December 11th?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Caldwell Johnson, a second by Mr. Barron. Please, any discussion? Okay, please vote. Motion passes 6-0 with one abstaining. The second set of minutes is for December 13th, 2018. May I have a motion and a second to approve those minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Barron, second by Ms. Caldwell Johnson. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 with two abstaining. And finally, the final set of minutes is for December 17th, 2018. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from December 17th, 2018?
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Ms. Caldwell Johnson, second by Mrs. Delagardelle Shelley. Please vote. Motion passes 6-0 with one abstaining. Next, I will turn it over to Dr. Ahart for district recognitions.
Tonight, we have some important news to share, along with a very special guest as a part of our meeting recognitions. Over a year ago, Des Moines Public Schools began an effort to make Special Olympics a more meaningful experience for all students. Thanks in part to encouragement from Thomas Hoffman, our principal at Brody Middle School, along with the good work of our special education and physical education staff, our middle schools set off to become Special Olympic Unified Champion Schools. Unified Champion Schools bring together students both with and without intellectual disabilities through education, sports, and youth leadership to provide them with the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to create and sustain school communities that promote acceptance and respect. Last April, we began a new tradition at DMPS as more than 300 students representing all of our middle schools gathered on the campus of Drake University for our first Unified Sports Day. This week, we are honored to host leaders from Special Olympics as we continue to build on this effort at DMPS. One of those with us this evening is Dr. Timothy Shriver, the chairman of Special Olympics International. Tim brings a wealth of educational experience to his work, from holding a doctorate in education to having been a classroom teacher to being the co-founder and chair of the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Today, through his leadership, Tim is not only following in the footsteps of his mother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who founded Special Olympics, he is moving forward in ways that support our own goals of inclusion and equity for all students. To share more about this, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Timothy Shriver. Dr. Shriver?
Thank you very much, distinguished members of the board. Ms. Bradley, welcome. I get to be, I think, your first formal speaker in your new role. I hope I don't disappoint. I hope I'm not the, you don't look back and say, whoa, we got over that first meeting. But congratulations, and thank you all for a few minutes to share a little bit the story of our movement and why we're so proud and excited to be in partnership with you. I'm joined here by colleagues of mine from Special Olympics North America who are very concerned and committed to the future of Des Moines. I'm joined by my colleagues, John Kliegel and his colleagues from Special Olympics Iowa, who have responsibility for our work across the state. And I'm joined by people of goodwill who see in this moment a unique opportunity for educators and people committed to the ideals of inclusion to work together more systematically to achieve measurable, critical educational outcomes. Our movement is 50 years old. We were started in 1968. Don't worry, you won't get a full history. We were started in 1968, and most people would have seen us, and maybe still today see us as a charity, an organization designed to help, support, give services to, for people with intellectual disabilities. 1968, the country was divided, the country was tense, the country was at war, the country was violent. There was a great deal of despair and concern. There was a great deal of tragedy in the country, in some ways not terribly dissimilar from today. In those days, people with intellectual disabilities were pariahs, hidden, isolated, institutionalized, almost unseen. The population of people with intellectual disabilities in institutions peaked in 1969. The institutions were still growing here in this state and around the country. So we were born at a time of enormous pain in the families of people who had intellectual disabilities, and certainly even greater pain in the lives of those who were so labeled. If you fast forward 50 years, today we're in 173 countries. We have over 6 million Special Olympics athletes and community-based volunteers and partners who participate in over 100,000 games a year. What have we learned in 50 years? One simple lesson, which I want to share with you tonight, which I hope we will be able to share with every student in this city in the course of the years ahead. We started out as a movement for people with intellectual disabilities. We have changed. We are still a movement that supports their hopes and dreams, making sure that they're heard and understood and empowered to have their voices seen and heard. But we are also now a movement from people with intellectual disabilities. We are a movement that is trying to marshal an alternate energy field in the culture. We are a movement that is trying to unlock a power that has been unseen and unnoticed, and as a result trampled, and at our own detriment, at the detriment of every child in Des Moines and every child in Iowa and every child in the United States. To the extent any child grows up not seeing, understanding, or valuing their peers with differences, they grow up a smaller and more hopeless person. And to the extent we educate them in relationship, in play, and in leadership to work and play and grow and develop together, they grow up bigger. Hearts bigger, minds bigger, better learners, better citizens, better members of families. I spent the day today at Meredith and Hoover interviewing many of your students. It was an enormous privilege. I asked them all kinds of questions, big questions. Does everyone matter? Are we all in this together or not? Is there something bigger in your life worth caring about, worth giving yourself to? Are you afraid of failure? These are the kinds of questions that 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds responded to in ways which would have made each and every one of you, I believe, extremely proud. There was a resolute spirit in those groups, one after the other. Young people of all colors and sizes and ages saying over and over again, in our schools, in this city, we are not willing to accept a worldview where people don't respect everybody's gifts. This is from the mouths of 12-year-olds. And when I pressed them, what about bullying? What about loneliness? Some of them said, yes, there is bullying, and yes, there is cutting, and yes, there is loneliness, and we're here to change it. We want to build a different kind of school system. We want to build a different culture. We want to change our halls. We want to change the cafeterias. What happens, I said, when you see a child sitting alone in the cafeteria? Every single kid, I want to go over. What if somebody made fun of you? I wouldn't have that person as a friend. Why not? Because he or she doesn't understand. They can't be a friend of mine if they don't understand that everybody has value. I believe that our partnership, when we think of Unified Champion Schools, we have a vision. Some of you are old enough to remember Title IX. There was a time when girls' sports was not accepted or assumed to be a staple in the lives of young people growing up in this country. I hope someday that's also true about what we call unified sports. Why shouldn't every high school in this city have a boys' team and a girls' team and a Special Olympics unified sports team? And why shouldn't those schools and those teams compete for varsity letters? And why shouldn't they compete interscholastically? And when the pep rally comes and the young men come charging in and the young women come charging in, and then right after them, the young unified athletes come charging in, and the place goes nuts, and the banners are flying, and the band is playing, and the cheerleaders are cheering, and the drums are stomping. Why not? Why not 14-year-olds looking down on the floor of that court and seeing their friend with Down syndrome who's got his arms or her arms raised in the air as a hero, as an icon of the school? We have a vision that every school in this city will have young people being invited to lead a movement of inclusion. We have a vision that every one of those teams of young leaders will take as their responsibility creating cultures and climates that we can measure. Cultures and climates and making them inclusive of all. I think I'm already probably over time, and I don't want to ruin your very kind welcome, but I do want to say to you that we're here for good. We have support from, we're not here just with our hand out. We have financial resources to help stimulate this kind of transformation. We have data that shows that when we do it well, the outcomes are good academically and socially and behaviorally and culturally. We're not expensive, but we are high impact. And if you ask me what the country needs now is young people who are given the voice to tell the story of a future that maybe the rest of us haven't quite figured out how to guarantee them. But they're ready. I know you know this. I'm a believer after one day. I'm a believer that they're ready to give themselves unselfishly to a more inclusive future, that they're willing to work hard to make it happen, that they're willing to stand up in the face of bullying and humiliation and intolerance at their own risk, and that they're willing to do that right now. And so this little program, started in 1968, comes here to Des Moines 50 years later, saying we want to be an education partner. Yes, we're a sports organization. Yes, we're a charity, but we're a global movement. We're an inclusion revolution. And we're an education movement. And we want to educate every child in this city, not to reverse negative attitudes and stigma and prejudice and discrimination, but to grow up with the opposite: open hearts, open minds, and a commitment to inclusion. Thank you very much.
You- Yeah, come on up. Keep talking.
So you say, so I scratched my notes and I made a huge mistake. So some people say this is not possible, but I want you to know that here in this room tonight is a person I met when she was 3. I just saw the picture for the first time since then. A person who, when she was born, a lot of people might have not have had great and high expectations, but as far as I know, she's the only person in this state who's been selected from peers around the world as a leader to travel from this state to the United Arab Emirates, to Abu Dhabi, for a global gathering of the world's most committed leaders on the issue of inclusion. The head of the World Bank will probably be there, the World Health Organization, the head of state, senators and congressmen from the United States will travel, and they will be accompanying Joy Rector. And so if you don't think the world can change, Joy, will you stand up? There you have an agent of the change.
Thank you again so much, and thank you, Joy, for being here too. Our next item on the agenda is the consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information desk to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. We appreciate your input. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. Ms. Anderson, do you have the motion?
I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $7,014,384.63.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Ms. Langford, any discussion?
Thank you, Cindy. I just wanted to take a moment because I think sometimes, particularly for the public, you know, the items on our consent agenda can just get skipped over and we don't get a chance to really talk about. We have some important things that come through on our consent agenda, and particularly our latest monitoring report 2.10, community and civic engagement. I just wanted to publicly say, Tom, a lot of the work that I read about was really exciting. All of the work, this monitoring report outlines a lot of the work that's happening in terms of our work with community schools, the work that we're doing with our English language learners, the work that we're doing in terms of engaging the community through our website and social media. And it was just really, I was heartened by reading a lot of the things that we have going on in the district. And I don't know if we don't tell that story well. And so if you haven't checked out that report, I encourage you, go on the website, check out this latest monitoring report on the consent agenda under D. I think we're doing some really noteworthy work. You're welcome.
We have one item that we just sealed the deal on today that I couldn't include because it was too late, but that'll come at a later date. But we continue to press on that very important issue. Thank you for calling that out.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item D3, calendar FY20, which was moved from the consent item. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
Yes, so we went through a little bit of a different process in developing the proposed calendar for FY20 than we have in the past. Having followed a pretty traditional calendar, and this is not too far from that, but it has some significant changes. One of the things, because I was really working elbow to elbow with the DMEA on this, one of the things we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose track of was the parent-teacher conference element. we have some partly tradition and partly contractual parent-teacher conferences built into both the fall semester and the spring semester, where we do the equivalent of a full school day of parent-teacher conferences, and then the equivalent of a half day in both semesters of additional parent-teacher conferences for those for whom the regular school day is not a convenient solution. Josh and I put in intentionally a marker for those dates, and because this calendar is quite a bit different from the traditional calendar over the last several dozen years. We wanted to make sure that part was very clear to our teachers, which is our largest employment group, and for whom the calendar is the most impactful. What was not clearly stated on this calendar was that for the last 7 years, what we have really pushed and encouraged our buildings to do is to schedule those outside of regular school day hours for parent-teacher conferences to be creatively utilized. Because we're employing about almost 2,900 teachers and the building administrative staff in engaging in these parent-teacher conferences, the cost for these parent-teacher conferences is not insignificant. And so we want to make sure that we're utilizing that resource as effectively as possible. So we have encouraged our buildings to utilize the outside of regular contract day hours as creatively as possible. So what you see on the calendar tonight, and most pointedly, is Beggar's Night. The parent-teacher conferences do not need to be held on that night, but that time, that out-of-contract time, is delineated there to ensure that all of our teachers understood that we're following contract and that those hours are accounted for. However, we have lots of examples. I won't go through all of them, but a lot of our buildings have been really creative, the principal and their building leadership teams, in figuring out, okay, so we have this resource. How do we best employ that to ensure that we're connecting with our families for whom we're most challenged in making a meaningful connection to support the learning of their students? Lots of different ways that people have utilized those hours. Home visits, for instance, or appointments where people can meet off-site in the family's home, in a location closer to the family's home, at a different time than what the calendar reflects for the parent-teacher conferences at school. So I just want to ensure people that was really a marker for time. There is no mandate or requirement that schools hold parent-teacher conferences at those times. We just wanted to account for it in how we program out the hours for the teacher contract. And I'm certainly open to questions or clarifications on that.
Before we move on, can I get a motion and a second to approve item D3, calendar FY20?
Move approval.
Okay. Are there any other discussion points or questions?
I do, I just have a question. You said that principals get really creative. I realize every school is going to be different, but they they're sharing out that the staff is able to, within a certain time frame, be creative, right? They do have that.
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't know if some were like, we really want you to, to meet only on these 2 days, or
No.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson and a second by Ms. Langford. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item E1, open enrollment, late applications for denial. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the item?
Yes, per Iowa code, there is an allowance for open enrollment where resident students in any given district can apply for enrollment in a different school district in which they do not reside. There's a state mandated timeline for that, but applications can be received outside of those timelines, and when that happens, they go through a vetting process internally, and those that you have on the agenda tonight are those that did not meet the special exceptions and so have been recommended for denial.
Okay. May I have a motion and a second to deny the open enrollment late applications listed for item E1?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we do have a speaker, Jerry Tripp. If you'd like to come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Jerry Tripp, and I live at 8052 Dima Drive. My son is a junior at Lincoln High School. He has been severely bullied. He was physically assaulted on December 11th, to which he got a fractured rib, a concussion. Him and I have both been lacking sleep, having to go to mental health counselors for counseling, where we have post-traumatic stress disorder. We live about 5 houses away from the Carlisle district. I'm asking that you please reconsider that he goes there for his own emotional health, physical health, my mental health. I've already lost $2,000 worth of wages because of these assaults. I have pages of her cease and desist from other students at the school. If you, as school faculty, care about students, I think their civil right of education being important and caring about the children is to allow them to go somewhere where they feel safe. We were offered a safe school transfer. During the time I was in the school resource officer's office, there were several incidents at the other schools that I were made aware of, and I am not interested in open enrolling to any of those schools. I don't want to have to lie, but I have people who live in Carlisle that will say we live there, so he can go. I wanted to do it the honest way. I wanted to do it so it's convenient for everyone, and so I can have my mental health and emotions back, instead of having to fear my child is going to be dead one day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here. We do have a motion by Kirsten and a second by Rob. Is there any discussion or any questions? Okay, please vote. Motion passes 6-1. Again, thank you for being here. Administration will be reaching out to you with next steps as far as reaching a resolution. The next item on our agenda is item E2, Management Limitation 2.1 Treatment of Students Revision Proposal. This is a discussion item that I've brought forward for the board's consideration with proposed revisions to that policy, if you have that in front of you, including changing the words accordingly to without limiting the above, which is essentially updated practice and policy language to indicate that the superintendent's operational definition is of the broad policy is not limited to only those sub-policies, and then also adding the sub-policy which reads as follows: cause conditions or allow environments that contribute to the school to prison pipeline, including the employ of school resource officers, without a professional development structure reflective of the district's equity plan. There is a rationale document also included with the agenda item, noting that our relationship with the Des Moines Police Department is very valuable and that the school resource officers interact with our students on a daily basis, and that I believe the board has probably read through the document, so I'm not going to read it verbatim, but there are models that are pointed to in there that this would align with, including progressive models for policing in schools, best practices and emerging examples, published by Leadership for Educational Equity. And it also aligns with Action Step 4 in the Safe School-Based Enforcement through Collaboration, Understanding, and Respect local implementation rubric, which was developed by the U.S. Departments of Education and Justice. So I guess with that introduction, I will open it up to the board for discussion, and also for Dr. Ahart to participate in the discussion, as well as far as what implementing this would mean for the district. Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
Madam Chair, I really appreciate this modification, and I think, as I think about the impact and implications of it, it really goes back, in my opinion, to some of the early conversations we had around the treatment of students monitoring report and the notion of the impact of bias on disproportionality. And I believe that the clause that you're adding really allows us to create opportunities for not only continuing to support our staff as they become more culturally competent, but also to extend that same requirement to others that interface with our students in the building. And so to the extent that this is an extension of what we're already doing, and it also reinforces that we mean what we say, I really believe that this is an important addition to our policy and one that I can fully support.
Thank you. Other comments? Ms. Langford?
I just want to thank you, Cindy, for submitting this proposal. Like, there are just moments where I'm really proud to serve with the people that I serve with, and this is just one of those moments. So I think it's not a question for me. All of our staff go through some form of training around bias. I think it should be no different for our SROs. So yeah, I also fully support.
Kirsten?
I think for folks that have been involved in the education space, the relationship between schools and police officers in schools has been complicated, and there is evidence and data that we can point to across the country that shows that the presence of police officers can have negative effects on our students, particularly our students of color. And I think that this will help us in our mission to continue on our equity plan and to continue to make sure that all of our staff are continuing to do the best work for our students. And so I think that this would not disclude those that maybe come to us from outside, and the work that we do with community partners is ever important. So I think this shows our value to both our students and our community partners.
Thank you. Any?
Yeah, I would just say that it's easy to, I think it's easy in our community to take for granted the work that the district is doing to support cultural competence and equity, and as Dr. Shriver mentioned earlier, full inclusion and equitable treatment of everyone. And this policy actually will give administration an additional tool in asserting that agenda more broadly than within the doors of the school. We do have a very positive relationship with Des Moines Police, and I think we've had very healthy relationships, particularly with the SROs. However, as the board is aware, over the last 2 years, we've had 3 different changes in position in the leadership of our SROs. That's not a criticism by any stretch, but it's just the natural progression of people's careers. But what happens with police work specific to schools is very different than what happens in the broader community. And we need to ensure that the presence of our police department is aligned with the values of the district and of our school community. And stability in personnel is one piece of that we don't have much control over, but certainly having some teeth in governance policy as to the expectations that we can share, not just as a personal desire, but as a matter of policy, and ensuring that the development, the collaborative professional development that our building teams incorporated with our SRO team undergo is just has a much more solid foundation through the revision of this policy. So I think it's a positive step in the right direction.
Mr. Barron?
Just for the record, though, I do want to make sure and underscore what the superintendent just said, which is that we do have a positive relationship with our SROs. I understand that we've had some turnover and the sergeants that have led that unit, but we actually have several SROs who have been in their buildings for many, many years, and are very much a positive impact and influence in kids' lives within our buildings. And I think that that should be stated from the board perspective as we have this discussion, because I agree with having training that is aligned with the training that all of our other building personnel are going to have. But let's make sure that it's understood that we have very good SROs that are very much contributing positively to our kids' lives.
Absolutely, and that is something that I did mean to also mention, is that this is by no means an evaluation or a reflection on the SROs that we have working in our school district, and their service is greatly valued, and we know that they value our kids too. But I do want to make sure that is understood as well. So thank you. Nothing else? Okay. So this was a discussion item, and so from what I've heard, it will be then on the agenda for next time for action. So thank you. Okay. Moving on. The next item on our agenda now is item E3, our board work plan. This also is a discussion item that has been added as a standing agenda item as part of our self-assessment and accountability process. So if you have that in front of you, I just wanted to quickly go through it, and some of it we'll be visiting in work session as well. But a couple things to point out, and you all can chime in where appropriate. I was going to mention a couple of items that have passed the CLAT Coffees and Day on the Hill. That information is now on the informational items in the next section of our agenda, so that's there. Thank you. Another item that is passed is reviewing the policy edit list. I have reviewed that, and to my knowledge, the policies we haven't taken care of yet from the previous list. The only one that I believe we had interest in still pursuing is that equity policy, which is on our work plan. We just don't have it assigned or a date to that. So that might be something we want to get slated. And I know, Deanna, that you were working on that previously. So yeah, we can either decide that now, or we can talk about it in our work session. You're in? Okay, so happy to take volunteers on that, aside from Deanna for a ad hoc committee.
Sorry, I'd like to continue to work with Deanna on this policy.
Okay, and was there a third person, or?
I think it was Natasha who had worked with us previously on
Bradley,
this.
would you like to jump in? Okay, and then do you have a thought on a reasonable timeline?
I'm trying to remember where we were at. Yeah, I think we could probably bring something for discussion in February.
Okay, how about we put second, we have 2 meetings in February, yes? Mm-hmm. Second meeting in February. Does that sound good? Okay. Items due today, board support position. More information will be shared at our work session on that. And then we also had board listening sessions listed, and wondering if there's anything to report there. And that was around, I don't know if you have that up. I have it printed out here. Sorry for the delay here, don't have it. Rob, Deanna, and Kirsten. That was also related to treatment of students and around behavior and various incidents on or around school properties. And it was about determining a list of stakeholder groups and potential plan and schedule for listening sessions to inform board policy. And if we want to put a later date on that, this would be the time to do that. Next board, you're right, you got that right the first time. Possibly.
Meeting with students about a ton of things, but if it, in terms of the things that we want to meet, I know we have to go out and do community listening sessions
Yep.
in terms with our work with that, so I just, if it folds into that, then I'm like, maybe we should wait. If it
Agreed.
doesn't, then.
Does everybody agree with that, to kind of wait and,
Yeah, could we put it on like as the due date as with our next board folks? Because I think we would have an idea then if yes, like once we meet with them on that Saturday in February, we would have an idea of, yes, this work fits in with that, or no, it doesn't, and then we would be able to make that decision and move forward.
so in regards to their listening sessions, I did get a message
Okay.
today, and that they would be interested, if it works for the board, in conducting and actually staying, they're coming February 2nd to work with us, and staying through Tuesday to actually do those community sessions Sunday through Tuesday, if the board wishes.
And some of these topics could be,
That might be something that.
we could
that
negotiate
could,
with them.
or could be a discussion and find out. So, perhaps,
That was sort of part of their
yeah.
process anyway,
Right.
so I
I think-
personally, I don't have a preference as to when, probably sooner versus later, so
Yep.
if that makes sense, then absolutely.
So we're good with,
Wait, is that, can I get clarification?
yes. February 2nd is when we meet with them, so the 3rd, 4th, and 5th is when they would look at holding a number of community sessions around the district.
Got it. What I remember, though, from their presentation, and because I remember we were having questions about the scope and if we could have larger meetings to encompass more people.
Yep.
They didn't necessarily, I don't remember it being broken out by demographic. I remember they were talking about just like large sessions, but not specifically like student-focused, or, do I remember correctly?
I think that's something we can
We just might
follow
want
up
to
with
get that
them.
clarification. That would be a
Yep.
deciding factor for me.
Okay.
Do you think that gives, we'll have enough time to, you know, get the community there, you know, I guess? I mean, it's less than a month.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's,
I'm checking my calendar. I'm gonna count the number of weeks.
I mean, I just want them to
Yeah.
show up, so.
It would be 4 weeks from tonight, would be February 5th. So that would give us 28 days to notify the community, which I think if that is something that we want to do, even if we don't have details, I think like a save the date, specific times are coming, I think.
right, I think if we want to do it, we start engaging them tomorrow to
Say
find
tomorrow,
out their,
yeah.
yes.
Well, I would also offer that any delay beyond that February timeframe puts us into budget hearings and all of that. So I think we have to be careful about
Yeah.
what we all have going on the calendar. So I think sooner versus later, so we're not butting up against another request of the public for budget
Their time.
conversations, et cetera.
Case, can we get can you have the conversation, or whoever have the conversation with next board like tomorrow to see? And then we can figure out if we need to go a separate route for the student thing or not.
Well, and I think I don't think it's one or the other. I think we can do sessions on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th with the broader community, and I think if what we come back with next board tomorrow is that isn't the appropriate time or space to engage with students, I think we could come up with a plan to meet with other constituency groups, but this is something that we were gonna do with next board anyway, and I don't see any reason to not go ahead and do this and then supplement with additional as the board sees fit.
Okay, so, okay,
And I just wanted to just make sure it didn't conflict with anything like Terry was saying, but I don't feel like there's anything going on the 1st of February, so.
okay. Okay, so, I'll go ahead and get back in touch with next board tomorrow, and we'll probably need to have staff support in finding locations, and then find out what their agenda would be, and
Pushing out invitations.
yes, and pushing out invitations, and then also, so that the board knows what that will entail, so that a decision can be made later as far as if supplemental listening sessions with other stakeholder groups will need to happen in regards to this. Yes.
So 2 quick points. One is that Sunday is the Super Bowl. So not a great day to schedule meetings about the future of schools.
Okay.
And the other point is, board chair knows this, but I'm out of town, out of the state that week, basically through arriving back on Monday. So I won't be there for the weekend session and wouldn't be there for
Right.
most of these sessions either.
Okay. And the sessions that they would have are primarily they're facilitated by the next board coaches, but they would want board members to be present, but that,
Not necessarily leading them, but
right,
but
hearing.
but on board and
Yeah.
present. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for making those points.
Is it possible to go back a week? To move those dates 1 week later to allow for all of us to be there?
They would have to come a second time.
Oh, it's tied into the retreat.
Right.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So when I talk to them, we'll talk about Super Bowl Sunday. Might come as a surprise, but some people don't care about football. But anyway, it might show up. Some people don't, but some people do. And so we
Several
might
dozen million do too, though.
So Sunday might be a great time for people who really would rather have something else to do to come to a listening session. But
Question would be, with it being a Sunday, that also might give us an opportunity to engage our faith community in that time that happens after services, or like to go, I don't know, as appropriate to be a little bit creative, because I know that is something that we've talked
5
about in the
o'clock,
past.
5:30.
And staff would have a better idea of what that looks like, because I think it's an evening game, right? Or
yeah,
is it an
so
early
maybe
game?
it's an early afternoon. I suppose it depends on when you. Commercials start at 3. So maybe
Commercials
it's
start at
maybe it's a
3.
1 p.m. session
Oh,
before
for the
before
Super
that.
Bowl, right?
Not the commercial.
Okay. Okay. So I think we're okay to move forward from that topic. I think I know what I'm supposed to do, and what I need to get back to all of you on. Upcoming, just to have on the radar, City Council School Board joint meeting. Terry, Tom, and I are going to meet with Mayor County Councilmember Coleman and Scott Sanders on the 16th of this month to continue planning, and hopefully we can come up with a date and or a proposal of dates to see what works for that from there. We have some 360 evaluation collection of information is in process. Our next board coaching schedule, we have our first retreat on February 2nd, and then we'll probably be getting a schedule from there. And finally, a number of superintendent compensation and evaluation committee items have a February 5th date on them, just to give you a heads up on that. And then items to add. At our last meeting after the monitoring report 2.3 treatment of employees, we talked some about policy language. I don't know if review of that policy is something that we want to put on there. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. Was there more to?
Well, it's
add that?
the superintendent evaluation committee is
Yes.
cited. Is it the superintendent compensation committee, or is there? I'm not familiar with that particular committee.
I think it's the compensation.
Is it the compensation committee?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's-
superintendent compensation committee.
So the 2 items, the rubric and the timeline, are both designated to the superintendent compensation committee. It's the wording says superintendent eval committee, and I just don't think that committee exists. So I want to make sure that it's either
Yep.
compensation committee or an ad hoc committee.
Okay, it is the compensation committee. I was thinking it was all the same committee?
Yeah. I mean,
Can it
it's-
all be the same committee? And I'll just get the wording corrected?
Yeah, well, and that way then I don't ignore it because I'm on that committee, so I have to pay attention and do it then.
Okay. Superintendent, sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I just had a quick question about our joint meeting with the city council. Do
Yes.
you have any idea what we would want the outcome of that meeting to be, or what the purpose of that time together would be for?
Well, I'll jump in and try to give you a sense of what we've been discussing. What we decided we did not want was a repeat of our last session, which was, Rob, 3 years ago?
August of 2000, I don't know, feels like it was yesterday, but
Yes.
a couple of years ago.
And at that point, it felt like sort of a report out on all of the mutual things that the district and the city were collaborating on. And we think that's great, but we really believe that those are things that we delegate to our superintendent and the city manager just as a matter of operational functions and things that they're responsible for. And so our conversations have really focused on things that we need to be talking about at a policy level or things that we can jointly own as a way to drive our collaborative work. So one of the things that came up was the city's focus on neighborhood revitalization. And if you'll recall, there is a new report that was issued, the CZB report, where the city has now identified 4 neighborhoods where they intend to invest a substantial amount of money to focus not only on stabilization but also revitalization. And our conversations were around ways that we might leverage the district's assets and resources to support some of that work. And where it goes from there, I think is what our next conversation will be about. But that's generally sort of how we've focused our efforts on ways that we sort of leverage our joint resources in a way that speak to the needs of the people that both live in the neighborhoods and also kids that attend our schools that live in those neighborhoods. So what that ultimately looks like, I don't know, but that's sort of where the conversation is focused at this point. Is that fair?
Spot on.
Yeah, I'm just wondering from a board, if it's more of a board to board or board to council meeting this time versus more of
It
our
is,
chiefs.
Yeah, that's what
I'm
we're
wondering
trying
if
to
we can
achieve.
do a prep session before then, so just kind of we're all on the same page about what we hope for that meeting to be.
Are there things in particular? I mean, I think it's an open slate right now. So if there are things that you would like for us to focus on,
Oh, go ahead.
I think as an individual board member, I have my own opinions about the neighborhood revitalization plan, right? And so I would just be interested in us fleshing that out more a little bit as a board, kind of what we were thinking about in terms of district resources and what we would like to add. I'm also really interested, a lot of the conversations that came up, I think, with our change in school hours, is we started talking about a lot of our safe walking route access. I don't know if that's a place for the board to be involved in that or not, or if that's more a chief function. But I do know that the conversation about sidewalks and kids walking to school, that's a function of the city. I think that would be an opportune time to maybe broach that conversation.
Well, and I know I've mentioned this to the board before, and I don't know if I've raised it up here, but out of some conversations in San Antonio last year, I had the opportunity to meet Mayor Cisternos, and he had spoken about some of the work they did in that city to connect their schools with their public libraries and doing some really great work to create literacy-rich environments across the whole city and across the community for kids. And we all know that education has huge gains for kids in terms of what their lives look like afterwards, and that access to books and the internet. And I know our public library recently did a policy where anyone, regardless of how many fines they have, can still use the computers and use the internet. So I think there are policy conversations happening, and I'm just wondering if that would be a space for this meeting too, to start thinking about how can the schools be part of that conversation of creating a literacy-rich city for our kids and, you know, for all community members, so.
Which I do know the Des Moines Public Library is a community partner now.
Right.
That's recent, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
and
but I
has
just
an
think like
MOU,
continue
but
to have those conversations, how can the city partner with, you know, some of their entities in our schools? As a librarian, I would love to see space for, you know, utilizing that space in better ways for our families and for our kids, especially in those areas of the cities where, you know, the public libraries aren't accessible by DART yet. Like there, you know, there's lots of things that I think and connections that could potentially be made that could help our kids and their families, so.
Turn your mic on.
We know sometimes how these joint conversations can go. We have lots of good discussion, and then we bring up ideas that maybe neither one of us have really given much thought to, and then the meeting's over and nothing really happens. So I'm like, if we have kind of idea of maybe some top things that we want to push, and we give that information to them in advance so they can review it, we offer them the same opportunity to do the same. I just wonder if it could be a more productive meeting. Like, these are some things we want to walk away with.
Well, since everyone's chiming in on this, I think that there's a different focus for this board than there is primarily for the council in the constituency that they discuss and that we discuss and we seem focused on. I think that our work and in the work that Tom leads is primarily focused on generational change, primarily focused on poor and struggling families. And if we're going to devote time to meeting with the city council, then I want that time to be focused on how we, in a broad way, make a joint commitment to better meeting the needs of poor and struggling families in the city. I am not focused on the operational aspect of these things, as it's not something that matters to me, or it's not the role that I ran for. But I think the moral and ethical way of approaching a conversation like this is to talk about the people for whom any minute or hour of conversation can have the greatest impact for.
Thank you, Rob. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And especially when we think about our student, we should be outcomes focused and definitely looking toward those families.
I do wonder though, if thinking about the work that the Human and Civil Rights Commission has been doing, and I know that one of their proposals and one thing that they had talked about that was, we already know that we're a majority minority school district, and I know that one of those proposals they talked about how 2040, that would be the reality of our city. It's not yet the reality of our city, but it's coming, and that was one of the proposals that that they had spoken about. So I'm wondering too if drawing a connection to whatever direction that work goes in, that potentially that could be our bridge between where we are and where the city council potentially is. I don't know, but.
Thoughts about where the conversation could. So many of us have so many different thoughts about where the conversation can go. So I just, again, really want to lift up before we go, having some sort of idea what we want to focus on as a board to come to the table with, to give them time, you know, so we can have a really fruitful conversation that has a next step.
I think, you know, there's an opportunity if the council and the board are meeting together, clearly that's a public meeting, and elevating, I guess, in a way that Rob referred to, and what's good for our students is good for the city. That's just undeniable. What's good for our families is good for our students, to make that connection a little bit more directly. And the more we can elevate that connection, and that we all have shared responsibility in that helps lift that up on the agenda of a council that functions very differently from our board. And I think that that's a very appropriate role for this board, how this board has chosen to operate. And to Rob's point, this is not an operational board, this is a governance board. And a big part of that, which oftentimes I think is too easy for us to lose sight of, is setting the agenda. And I think that if we're thoughtful, as Deanna has suggested, you know, a joint meeting or meetings with the council that's thoughtful in advance can really elevate the agenda that would not only benefit our families and students, what we're all about, specifically to DMPS, but would also further the goals of the city in ways that they don't necessarily connect to because of how they operationalize their duties.
So I was just going to offer that the 4 neighborhoods that the city is going to be focusing on relative to neighborhood revitalization were really driven in large part by a variety of factors. But if I'm not mistaken, there's a portion of the Drake neighborhood in one, Oak Park in another, Columbus Park, and then I think Capitol View, all of whom are very diverse, have high levels of poverty. Obviously, we have multiple schools in those districts, so I'm not trying to suggest that that's what we definitely need to do, but if the city has already decided that they are going to focus and invest, I think that there certainly is a way, or should be a place for us to come alongside. That may not be the only thing we do,
Right.
but I think that that could be a place where we could put a stake in the ground and make some change, along with a variety of other things that we may come up with. So I
Right.
don't want to lose sight of that opportunity.
Yeah, good point. So I think, like I said, we're going to meet again, the smaller group on the 16th. I think what we can do then is bring back to the board whatever comes from that meeting. We have, our next meeting is the 22nd, and then we also meet again February, either the last meeting of this month or the first meeting of February, depending on what we're looking at for dates. We could work session after our meeting to really flesh out what it is we're coming with based on those topics. And I would say that we do take plenty of opportunities to, in these small group meetings, to remind our city counterparts of our different ways of operating, just so the board understands that we do keep that top of mind, that we are a governance board, and try to keep it top of their minds that we're a governance board and not a management board. So I think we'll move on from that topic.
Actually,
Okay.
I was just going to say I agree with Deanna and Terry. And it sounds like you have a good start, a really good talking point here that they're already working on. But I do think that instead of having too much of a variety, because we can get,
Yep.
off, and it wouldn't be as focused, I guess. So, thanks.
Okay. And then finally, last thing on this, is there anything that well, I started talking about 2.3, do we want treatment of employees? When we talked about that monitoring report, we also talked about, we talked about KPIs, but we also talked about, perhaps the policy needs to be revised. It's less of a KPI issue than a policy language issue. Is that something that we want to put on our work plan as a review item for an ad hoc committee?
I definitely think so. I mean, the level of, I don't know that consternation's the right word, but the way we stewed over that, I think leads me to believe that either we're not clear or we need to change something. So to the extent that one or both of those exists, I definitely think that at least at a minimum, a review of the policy is something that I would be more than willing to assist with.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm super interested in that, but I think, I'm like 3 committees right now. So just what's the timeline that we would want to have that done by? Like, when would be the time that we'd be looking at? Would that be a group meeting now, or a committee meeting now, or later in the year?
I think if we want,
If we want some change to happen, it needs to happen soon.
he
Then
needs
I'll
to,
back.
say, 'cause
Tom
we're
needs to have
halfway through
whatever language that is. Yeah.
a fiscal year at this point, and so changing a policy would mean changing monitoring, which would, I don't know what that looks like, I guess, from a from our governance standpoint and from, what's happened, because I don't think we've actually changed any KPIs since I've come on the board, so I'm not sure what that looks like when policy changes, but that is part of the consideration as well. I would assume that if you change policy, potentially that has to be responsive.
Yes. Yes, so there might be a sensible time to, based on that monitoring timeline and report, the cycle of your reporting, that would make sense to not bring it ahead of that. So
Is that something that maybe could be discussed in agenda planning with Tom, and then perhaps bring it back to the board on the 5th to look at forming a committee and what the timeline would be to make that work happen? Or not the 5th, is the 5th our next meeting, the 22nd?
22nd.
I think I just skipped the rest of January, I'm sorry.
That's
Do
fine.
that.
It's very cold.
Does that work for everybody? I think that's a good idea. We'll do that. Okay. Okay. So thank you. Anything else on that item?
I was just going to offer that on a couple of things that focus on superintendent compensation, et cetera. That work is already underway. So we are awaiting the results of information that we're getting from a third party to help inform that part of the process. So that's out the gate.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Next on our agenda are informational items for the board's review. F1 8304 demolition, East 13th. Did I read that right? Q 8304 demolition, East 13th. Item F2 Head Start Policy Committee meeting minutes for November 2018. And finally, F3 CLAT update. I don't know. I know these are informational items, but Heather, maybe you want to mention it right now out loud, what you have coming up.
Right, the legislative session is going to be starting Monday, January 14th, and so we're going to kick off our first coffee with legislators on the Saturday before, so Saturday, January 12th, the Saturday coming up, from starting at 9 o'clock at Hubble in the library. So we hope that we have a good turnout. Everyone in the audience is invited, and everyone at home, please come and with your questions, and we hope to get good engagement.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have items of privilege, and I would like to give our newest board member the first opportunity to share. Ms. Bradley.
Am I on? Okay. First, I would just like to thank you all. I am very excited to be on the board and serve. I've served as a former teacher for Des Moines Public Schools and also been on committees as well. And so I'm very excited to be able to start this process and really work with you all to make sure that our students are successful and teachers have the resources that they need in their classrooms. There are a couple of issues that I wanted to address, if it would be okay with the board, that I know that have come up since I have been selected to serve, and I wanted to make sure that you heard those things from me, so that if you were ever approached or asked about those things, that you could refer them to this statement that I am about to make. Both of my students, or my children, one attends private school, Grandview Christian School, my son does, and then my daughter is open enrolled at Roosevelt High School. So I'd kind of like to just take a few minutes, not too much of your time, just to, I guess, just share with you my reasoning for doing that. Didn't see that I would be doing this years ago when I made the decision. My faith is very important to me. It's the essence of who I am. It sustains me and it keeps me. And so when I was growing up, going to private school was something my parents always wanted to do for me. Unfortunately, they weren't able to afford to do anything like that for me, and I got the opportunity to do that for my own children, and chose that route for them because for me, it's important for them to have that foundation. So the choices that I made to enroll them both in private school was very personal for me. It was a very faith-based choice for me. My daughter, as she grew older, decided that was not the environment for her, and she left out of there at 7th grade. I was okay with her doing that. I am a product of public school, and I think I turned out okay. So I wanted to support her in that and allow her to be able to do that. At that time, I open enrolled her at Roosevelt High School. That was a decision based off of the fact that my family had attended there. My sister had been there. Unfortunately, we moved to Ankeny my 5th grade year, and I didn't have the opportunity to go to Roosevelt. So I'm actually living my dream through her. So she is a senior this year. Had she have been maybe a freshman in high school, I would have definitely explored the option of putting her at East High School, which is the district that I represent. But any person that's a parent in this room knows that telling your daughter her last semester in school that she would need to transfer is not going to go over too well with me. So she will finish out her senior year at Roosevelt High School. My son has no desire to be in the public school at this time. That is a choice that I do leave up to him. He is 13 years old and is able to communicate to me, but both of my kids know that if they ever decide that they want to make that transition, I support them wholeheartedly for that. And I'm telling you all that just to say that I hope that no one questions my ability to be the strongest advocate for Des Moines Public Schools. This district has been in my heart. Even when I left, I still continue to teach children in an after-school program. I just can't walk away from teaching. It's something that I've loved. I've been a member of the union and a union representative. I have a very unique perspective, and I think I can bring all of those different perspectives to this board. So we can have further conversations if you would like about that, but those were my reasonings for those decisions, but it will not stop me from making sure that I do everything possible to represent my district well and make sure that the students across the district are successful, and to work with you all to make sure that we make choices that are best for our students and our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, welcome. Any other board members have comments or items of privilege?
I'm probably just going to start a chorus of welcome, but Dwana, we got a chance when we did board orientation, I got to welcome you, but I just want to take the opportunity to welcome you and thank you for putting your name out there, because as we all know, that's not a difficult, or that's not an easy thing. Sorry, it is a difficult thing. And then, you took it one step further, sitting for a public interview. So thank you so much.
Anybody else?
Welcome. I was going to talk to you afterwards, but welcome.
Okay. Yeah.
I get to see Dewana regularly. Deanna. Ooh, that is not good.
That's
That
gonna,
is not
we
good.
already have. Yeah,
I get to see Dewana regularly, and I've already had the opportunity to extend to her my congratulations and my great enthusiasm about the opportunity to work with her. I think you bring great skill to the table, but I also love the perspective that you'll bring as well. So, thank you.
Okay. For the chair's report, going to catch Ms. Caldwell-Johnson off guard a little bit.
Uh-oh.
So the board has this for you for your past service as board chair. Realizing it's been a few meetings ago, but I'd like to give you this plaque and gavel on behalf of the board. And thank you for your service as board chair.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was an honor.
And now I will turn it over to Dr. Ahart for the superintendent's report.
All right, well, we are on the cusp of ending the first semester of the 2018-2019 school year, and as we'll be discussing in our work session, the first item on our work session, that because of year over year over year over year over year inadequate funding from the state, we're again faced with some significant budget challenges. We're up to the challenge, but not without sacrifice to the breadth and depth of the services that we provide to our students and families. So I'm grateful for a really strong team in helping us face these challenges, but when it comes down to it, when we average historically low state funding, and that's not hyperbole, it's historically low for going on a decade now. There are just some certain realities that can't be avoided. Also wanted to just mention to the board's aware of this work, but we are a charter member of the Urban Education Network, what was, I think, originally called the Urban 8. The 8 largest school districts in Iowa back in 1985 or 86 formed an organization. At that time, it was all of the school districts that had more than one high school. In the time right before I became superintendent, I believe, they added to their charter the addition of associate member districts. And since that time, at least in my experience, we have, me and several others, some here on the board, have been frustrated with what we feel like is a lack of influence by this group, primarily in terms of advocacy. So I served as the chair of the steering committee last year, and at the end of the year, at our second steering committee meeting, I proposed that we do a revisioning process for the organization in an effort to re-examine why it is we exist and become more focused on what our actual priorities are and what our goals are, and then ensuring that the structure that we have created in the mission and vision and bylaws of the organization actually support that. And so I have been actively engaged in chairing a committee of board members and superintendents from the original 8 school districts, who are the only ones who, according to our current bylaws, can serve on the steering committee. We've been making some really good progress in trying to define in an Iowa context what urban means, getting much more clarity around what it is we want from an organization like this so that we can be statewide much more effective in advocating for the most, for the districts that serve the most diverse student populations and some of the most disadvantaged students in the state. As we had talked about with our meetings with the city, if we serve these students effectively, it not only elevates them and their life trajectory, but it also strengthens the state and offers all of us more opportunity. So we'll have more to share on that. We have another meeting scheduled for a week from Friday. And we hope at that time to have a formal recommendation to bring to the existing steering committee for formal action. And that will probably mean, it looks like it will mean some significant changes for the UEN, but I think a long overdue sort of reboot of what that organization was originally envisioned to accomplish. So
Great.
More on that soon.
Thank you. I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and we will hold our work session in approximately 10 minutes.